Mr. President, I rise to pay tribute to my colleague, my friend, to our American hero, who lies in state just now in the rotunda of this Capitol, Congressman John Lewis of Atlanta, Georgia. Born in Troy, Alabama, the arc of his life is known to us all. He gave himself completely to the fight for the dignity of every American and every human being. And I wanted to just take a few minutes today, if I could, and just reflect a little bit on what made John so special and so different. There are many in this House, in this chamber, in the Senate, and in the House of Representatives who have fought for equality and justice. There are many who have marched or who have sacrificed, who have fought or who have led in many causes over many years. But John was both fierce in his passion for equality and humble in his spirit and gentle and kind. One of the great blessings of my decade here has been to get to travel with a group called the Faith and Politics Institute on an annual congressional civil rights pilgrimage. Many members of the House and Senate have done so. But through 5 different trips, I got to travel with John to Selma and Birmingham, to Memphis and Montgomery, to Charleston and Cape Town, to South Carolina and South Africa, to Alabama and to Delaware. I most treasure the memory of hosting John in Delaware in 2015 when he came and spoke to a whole school full of eager elementary school kids, spoke to a whole auditorium full of young community leaders, and then held a town hall for a discussion about equality and equity and civil rights. John dedicated his life to fighting for others and principally fighting for voting rights. But John, in his childhood, was confronted with the ugly reality of Jim Crow and of legal segregation, of apartheid here in the United States, and he couldn't follow the advice he was given by family and friends. Stay out of trouble. Don't get in the way. He lived his life by the credo, if you see something wrong, act like it. And so he was dedicated to getting in good trouble, into necessary trouble, and to doing the hard work of redeeming the soul of America. Long before America came to believe in John Lewis, he believed in the promise of America, and that he today lay in state on the catafalque that also held the remains of the slain President Abraham Lincoln, that he this week lay in state in the state capital of Alabama, and that he will be honored by millions nationwide and worldwide, is just a reminder that he was on the right side of history all along. He was arrested more than 40 times in the course of his activism for civil rights, and he proved that courage, as has been often said, is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. With many others, I had the blessing of being at the Edmund Pettus Bridge with John on several reenactments of that memorable Bloody Sunday March, and was with him at Brown Chapel AME Church for a service of inspiration and gathering before that reenactment of the march. And he stopped halfway across the bridge and asked each of us to just take a moment and pause. It's a bridge that has a crest to it. And he recounted how, as they cleared that crest, this line 2 by 2 of peaceful protesters, marchers, seeking to go from Selma to the state capitol to make their plea for access to that most fundamental of American rights in our democracy, the ballot box, that he could see that line of state troopers, of deputies, and a ragtag crowd of those who had gathered to do violence to those protesters, those marchers. And he was not gripped with fear. He was determined to go ahead, even though he said he was certain that might be his last day. You see, John is someone who understood the redemptive power of suffering, someone who I've described as a living saint, someone who was willing to take onto himself the violence visited upon millions of others in sustaining the brutality and the repression of racial segregation in our country. and by taking on and believing in and living a philosophy, a theology, an activist stance of nonviolence, John brought alive the conscience of a nation. I'll just say that in my own life, John was someone who made me believe in the possibility of forgiveness, of redemption, and of healing. If a man who had suffered as he did at the hands of so many bigots, so many acts of violence and disrespect, from the lunch counter sit-ins to the freedom rides, to that march on Bloody Sunday, if that man could be as hopeful, as kind, as generous in spirit, and as forgiving as he was to all who met him, holding on with fierceness to his commitment to justice and equality, yet open-hearted and open-handed to all he met, if that man could have walked among us, then I am one step closer to believing in the possibility of forgiveness for us all. I want to share my deepest condolences to his son, John Miles Lewis, and his family, to all who knew and loved and served with him, and it's my hope that his legacy will be a blessing, a challenge, and an inspiration for every American. There is now on the floor of this Senate the Voting Rights Advancement Act, renamed for John Lewis. On the 50th anniversary of the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, I carried a copy of that exact bill in that Congress named the John Lewis Voting Rights Restoration Act, and with John, asked a number of my colleagues if they would join in co-sponsoring it. One Republican did, a senator from Alaska, and many Democrats. What matters is not the party, but the purpose. And I'll close by saying that we should never give up on John's pursuit of a more fair and more equal America.